profession, my friend would say, how is lawyering? How is it going?
Well, lawyering is hand to mouth and Jackson. You know, every profession or every institution or every activity booms when you have the economic situation improve. So most of the things lawyers do now, just very few lawyers maybe will get something sufficient or so. But what is happening?
I mean, like people like Arthur Johnson.
No, not sufficient. We get be ungrateful to the Almighty. But what I'm saying is the economy is not like that for you to see, like the way other lawyers live in developed countries. It's not like that. So it's almost like hand to mouth. But at least we are sufficient. We are grateful to the Almighty.
Do you have a law firm?
Yeah, yes, I have a law firm.
How is it called?
It's consortium. Okay, yeah, consortium of legal practitioners. It is on Center Street, opposite the O Exclusive Supermarket. Yeah, that way we.
Councillor Johnson, are you accessible? Are you a people's person? Do you walk around in your community? Do people know you in the community? Say, if I were to go to the community now and say, I'm looking for Councillor Johnson, do I find your house easily?
Yeah, you can find my house easily. But to say I am accessible, I would say not likely because Jackson. For some of us, the kind of cases we have been in, the practice of law, the caliber and the kind of cases that we handle, you have to be very security minded. And knowing myself coming from a security background, people track you down on the basis of your weaknesses, where they know they easily can get you, where they know what you lack and what you can do, what you always love is where they track you from. So to say accessible, because I spend most of my time home reading. Yeah, I don't just go out. I don't go to party easily. Even if I go to a program that other of us, maybe like lawyers will go, I carry my own food. Okay. I don't go to nightclubs. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't allow myself to be in the streets by 8 o'clock or 7:30 going to 8.
Do you teach security?
Yes, I'm a criminal justice practitioner, Clarence.
Okay.
I've taught criminal justice for 25 years now.
Really?
Yes, the AME Zion University. When I graduated in 1999 with a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice, at that time I was also staying in the University of Liberia because I was a double major reading political science and public administration at the University of Liberia. Okay, at that time we all were in school together, Kara's grade, Samuel D. 12, yeah, all the guys. So when I graduated from the university with my second bachelor, I went back to school. And I was in the University Law School, Louis Arthur Graham School, and at the same time in Babangida. Somebody was saying, but LU has only one article. How will you be? Because the reason was at that time, LU was not really accepting Zion degrees. Yeah, LU were not accepting credits from Zion. So at that time, it took a time before the law school was the first to do that. And so I used the Zion credentials and entered the law school. Yes. Okay. And then when I graduated from the undergrad at the University of Liberia, Public Administration, minor in political science, I went in Babangida. So I was in the two schools simultaneously.
In Babangida and the law school?
Yeah, correct. So in 2009, if you check the yearbook, you'll see my name appeared there 2 times. I am the first in the history of university to graduate with those 2 distinguished degrees the same day. And then when I graduated from that, I didn't stop again. But if somebody asked me, but why you were doing all of this? I said, because I went to school for this matter only to get rid of poverty. And you were just talking about Lane Street here now. So I went back, I started doing public administration, I completed the courses, but I didn't do the thesis. Then I switched. From there, I decided to do Kofi Annan. I completed the courses. And then after that, because the practice had taken my time so much. So I decided to go back to do my thesis and so. But at the same time, too, I was doing my other programs, online programs and so.
Did you really plan to be a lawyer, or it was just a coincidence? Like you just said, let me go do my law?
No. I plan to be a lawyer.
Okay. What drove you?
What drove me is that my father, I saw just as the peace, the way he treated my father. Okay. Yeah, the old Bento Junction, right, LU campus there, Fender. They had somewhere right to that intersection. There was a Justice of the Peace court there. Normally I used to leave from LAC to come to town and sometimes visit my father, because my father in Fender. And so sometimes when I come to town, I'll have to wait for school fees, or let's say close for not school fees, because let's say, Grand Bachelor, once your somebody is a tapper, you will go free school. Yeah, so just to buy my uniform and buy all those small thing provisions and so.
Back the public clothing.
So there was a time of misunderstanding, and the old man went to court. So he spent more than $35-40, and now the money we were waiting for. So, so it really hurt me. I said, no, I got to go to school.
Okay.
The man was just collecting the money in the JP, just collecting the money. I said, no, I got to do law to law for people, to help people, to be a lawyer for people. They can, at the age sometimes around 8, 9, 10. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then in my dream, a lady told me before, way back, he said, when you do law, that way your life is, your career is.
That's good.
Yeah,
Are you helping people today?
Oh, yeah, man. I served as public defender for more than 4 years. Full-man lawyer, And even at this time, I still represent people. There are cases that will give me money. There are cases some people we spend our own money to represent them,
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on, Councillor Johnson. I don't want to take all your time. Like I said, Alfonso Zion, one of your colleagues, probably will call in or something, and maybe he want to join the discussion. But this is important for Liberia.
Right.
There have been mounting calls for the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court in Liberia. George Weah made some commitment. His government did not do so. Joe Boakai has started saying that. Multi-dimensional discussions among Liberians. Some lawyers think that is not possible. The law, there are laws. The court will not come here. Some say no. We can undo some of those laws. We can get the court coming here. Some people say it's been all 23 years now. We have had uninterrupted peace. What are we saying? Councillor Arthur Johnson, as a legal practitioner, a lawyer, a teacher, a lecturer yourself, how do you come into this discussion about War and Economic Crimes Court?
I mean, how long we have?
We have like 45 solid minutes. It might not be enough, but let's hear you. Maybe the next time we come, I'll look for one other lawyer at your level, and maybe you'll do some public education.
Yeah, the guy who has a counter view.
Counter view, yeah.
Look, the issue of the establishment of the Economic and War Crimes Court, Jackson, is not only legal. You got to look at the multidimensional approach. You got to look at the antecedents.
Council, I'm sorry. I want you to draw closer. Your people here, they harassing me. Say, Council, got to come to the man. This is the man we're waiting for. Yeah, Council.
You have to look at the antecedents. You have to understand the history of this country. You have to understand the politics of Liberia. And then you have to understand the domestic law of Liberia. And then also you have to understand the international law aspect of this whole thing. But in order to appreciate the argument, first of all, that's one of the things I was saying to one of my colleagues. I said, President Boakai will find it very difficult in establishing the Economic and War Crimes Court. When you see George, we are not president, we are not establishing the court. It's not because he didn't want to. But these are the issues, and we'll deal with them in details. First, I'd like to start with the Truth Commission's report.
Okay.
Many of our scholars, many of our public policy practitioners, political actors, and stakeholders, I think they have not read the Truth Commission's report. And it's important to read the Truth Commission's report. If you look at the TRC has certain specific mandate. But before the TRC came into existence, let us look at the history of Liberia. Liberia's problem is factored by 6 major factors or conditions. Those conditions were responsible for the conflict in this country. The problem of 1980, the problem of 1990, they were not just events. They were historical developments characterized with some political variables that unfolded for a long period of time. that in fact political actors and leaders at the time failed to address. And so when you had a situation of 1980, it was the definition of the situation based on a social condition that have gone unaddressed for a long period of time. So you have 1980. Then when 1980 came into existence, for the purpose of the change of the problems that had existed for more than 133 years in this country, the regime at the time was unable to solve the problems from 1980 to 1990. So the war came. So the issue of the war in 1990, it started from the day this country was established. People must know that first. Why there is change, why there is a war, why people fight war. Students of history, students of political science will tell you that, even public administrators. When the settlers came, before they came, in fact, the TRC documented that. The establishment of Liberia was done on the wrong footing. It introduced certain crises that are still existing in Liberia today. Well, the first thing was the crisis of penetration. When the settlers came, they wanted effective control over the land. And so what did they do? They used force and means, forced labor against the indigenous, and they ostracized the indigenous and told them that they were not citizens on their own land. And that existed for a long time. One of the only tribes, the tribe that actually fought the American Liberians at the time, were the Cllr and the Grebels. And now that is why you see most of the Cllr towns and the Grebel towns, those were very big towns in the period, during the period in the 1920s that could be used. But the American Liberians elite at the time did not decide to use those towns and establish their own post, because in order to use those towns, they were going to empower the indigenous in terms of commerce and customs. So they created their own cities. But there's that is another details about the history. Then another crisis was the crisis of penetration of identity. When the settlers came, the people were divided. You have the indigenous and the natives. Then you have the American Liberians elite. Among the American Liberians elite, you have the mulattoes and the dark skin. And then as time went by, because of their group being very small, they could not use the indigenous to incorporate. What they started doing, they started taking Sierra Leoneans, Nigerians, Togolese to incorporate them, and now they made them to be part of their class, to control the class because of their group. So that other factor had existed, the crisis of identity. And in the 1980s, that particular factor developed into what tribalism. The actual role of tribalism to play in the body politics of Liberia starting in the 80s. Then you have the crisis of distribution. The issue of education, promoting, going to specific schools to learn the state craft of the state. There were only particular persons that went to school, like for example, the Louis Arthur Graham School of Law, the Liberia College. Those days, the Nimtama could not enter those schools. Not at all. The reason was that those who went to those schools were people prepared to control the state and the affairs of government. So opportunities, the scholarships to learn, to go out to be educated were not given to indigenous. That existed up to 1980. Then you have the crisis of governance or participation. Indigenous were not allowed to participate. In fact, the Honorable Supreme Court of Liberia back in the days considered that the indigenous were not qualified enough to be citizens of Liberia. And then these things happen for a long period of time. And now when they happen for a long period of time, in 1979, people say that red riot. It was not red riot. The masses, the level that the masses have reached with the issue of disenchantment was at its peak. Now the progressives were the ones that were theorizing. They were the intellectuals among the indigenous. Sometimes people like to blame the progressives. I don't know why people blame them. Because those were people that preached for multi-party democracy at the time. The multi-party democracy that we enjoy today was based on the advocacy of the progressive. But let me tell you something. From my own analysis of the Liberian history, I want to believe that the progressives were not actually intending to overthrow the government. It looks like, from my view, they were advocating for inclusiveness in the political affairs of government. But the masses do not wait for that. The masses don't care about give us time to manage expectations. Like people talking about the quote unquote manage expectation, right? They don't care for that. So when they changed in 1980, the progressives were not prepared, in my view, to take over the matter of authority, to start the appointment, to move forward and say, look, somebody, you're not in the affairs of government. Because those guys were looking up to them. But I believe that the masses, the progressives were arguing that they wanted an inclusive government. They wanted where everybody will have the equal opportunity in government. But I don't think they had the belief or they had the perception or they were prepared for the change of government where they would take over the affairs of the state. And so that is where I think there was a political accident because the masses don't wait for you. That is why in the whole 1985, you found out if Doe was not going to, let's say, ban Bacchus Matthew were going to win. Because that time, you ask any child who you want to vote for, although they were not capable to vote in terms of the law, but you see that Bacchus Matthew was the need because that was the time. Now, when 1980 came, based on the crisis, these problems existed. And so there were a lot of things that happened between those period that many of those who were born in the 1990s don't understand. And so now they get do all kind of talking. Samuel Doe took over. Then there were problems between the guys who fought. That's who took over the matter of authority from the Toward regime. The Kuyongpa scenario came.
You mean the PRC guys?
The PRC guys, they started fighting themselves.
The Doe, the Tobo was saying, the Kuyongpa.
Exactly. The American Liberians were already pissed off with the manner in which they killed their people. And so some of them got involved. Some of them, at certain stages, Samuel Doe started bringing them in government. And the people will never forget what happened in 1980. And so you will understand there are literature to that effect that this also started manipulating Samuel Doe. And Samuel Doe started going against his own people. So you see Samuel Doe and Kuyongpa, then the conflict started. Then you had the history of the 1983, the Nimba Raid. Then the 1985 invasion that Kuyongpa brought. I was in Central Maria. I was living right on the rack here, Benson Street. I remember what happened. That time they had G2. The Richard Henry Law Firm, the Henry Law Firm was the G2 those days. The Defense Ministry was right down here, Benson Street here, where the veterans are. But so I remember most of these things. At that time, in 1985, when Kuyongpa, the national anthem, somebody they say, fellow Liberian, the National Patriotic Forces are taking work. That was as a child, you get a way of memorizing. So we said we to memorize it. And then when he took over, even though he didn't completely take over, but he managed to arrest some of the officials of government. It was an extension of the bloodbath when Samuel Doe came back. The history says Nimba County was a substantial victim. And then as time went by, realizing these atrocities and these historical accidents.
And this was so because Kuyongpa himself comes from
Nimba County. I saw AFL soldier. I was on campus.
He comes from a place called Zogowe, as a matter of fact.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I taught one of his sons. He was one of my students in the criminal justice college.
Okay.
The junior.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know whether he stayed in Broadway. Then I was on Ken Johnson Road certain time because as children, Maria boys, you're beginning, you're walking all around. I saw soldiers with body parts, and they said it was Kuyongpa's body. I'm saying they say, I saw it. Okay, it was not an easy thing in this town. We all know about the history of Charles Bion and what have you. All happened with that issue during that period. And then when 1989 came, President Cllr realized that in order to cross with his 200 Special Forces commandos, according to what he said, was to use Nimba County. And so he entered Nimba.
As a matter of fact, majority of them were from Nimba.
Correct. And Nimbanians have suffered substantially under the Doe regime. So we need to understand the whole story. Then we decide, ask ourselves, what is the way forward? We all here suffer people. We suffer losses. Okay. Now, when Samuel Doe entered, let's say when Taylor entered, the first thing is he sent the late Minister of Internal Affairs to go and find out from Nima County whether rebels were in Nima.
You mean Doe?
Samuel Doe.
Eroko Mosako.
Correct. So when he went, he came back, and I know sometimes maybe the reason was because I understand from the history that his mother was a Gio, I think, and his father was something like a Madingo. So when he came back, he said, no rebels were in Nima. It was later on that it was exposed that the MPF4 forces were in Nimba. And because of that, the situation changed. For those of us who were in Monrovia, the fight began. Many Liberians felt that the rebel incursion was something like a coup d'etat, it was just come to TDD and it's over. So Samuel Doe used a parable. He said, I still remember it on TV. He said, town trap is not for rat alone. That was what the late President Doe said. But I did not understand that parable until we got in 1990, 1992, 1993, then I understood the parable of the late president. But what happened in Jackson, from that 1989, that 1990, it was not easy in Monrovia. Because the war had intensified, people started running away. But the point was, Samuel Doe made some mistakes. In the AFL, he started disarming the other tribes. They were family too were soldiers those days. And I explained. And then those who were using the very good and sophisticated weapons were members of the crime tribes. So many of these soldiers started deflecting, running away. And some of them going to go and join MPFL. Some of them going to join IMPFL. But before the rebels came in, and while Liberians were so much interested that Taylor will come to town, the massacre was not easy in Monrovia. If you wore a red trouser or a red t-shirt, forget it. If there is a horse, sometimes you'll hear they say, or the other house was occupied by the Liberians or let's say by the Gio and Manapo. The next day you'll hear they say they massacred a whole horse. I experienced that in Chocolate City. We were living in Chocolate City at that time in 1990. There were friends that we knew who were living to the other island. In fact, that was the incident that actually caused everybody to leave Chocolate City that particular period in 1990. For mine, I left Chocolate City, I went to Douala. So, because of this, you will see that the war in Liberia, the Gio and the Mano fought on one side against the Mandingos. They said that the Mandingos were the one that informed Samuel Doe that indeed that rebels were in Nimba. And so when the AFL soldiers went there, they killed a lot of people. That was their argument and that was their reason. So it was like a paying debt issue. So people died. Now, if you calculate the first phase of the war from 1989 all the way, maybe coming to almost 2005, you observe the record shows that people say, well, the number of people that died.
Maybe 2003, you want to
2000. No, not 2003. I divided it into phases.
Okay.
I'm talking about 1995.
Okay.
They categorize it and say, look, the number of people that died is not less than 200,000. Some people say, oh, it's not less than, but it's more than that.
250,000.
It's more than 250,000. Now, when you check from 1995 to 2003, the number of persons also that died would be more than 200,000. So when you're calculating, more than 400,000 people die in this country because for the war and other factors.
Mm-hmm.
And simply because the Gio men and the Mano men were fighting. And they were fighting in the form of revenge, according to them. And then, so when Limbo came, the Mandingo said they were coming to pay debt. They were coming back to their home. And so they have to come back. And the only people who protected them, according to them, were the crown. That's how you had Ulimo J, Ulimo K. Ulimo, it was fine, Ulimbo. So when October now, the IMPFL period, if you check it, they actually fought up to September, December. Because from there, the whole of 1991, there was no war in the town to some extent. So before 1992, let's say by 1992, when Octopus was launched by President Taylor, from President Taylor, Prince Johnson was out of the country. So Ulimbo took over the entire British Island. And who invited Ulimbo? It was a IGNU.
Yeah, the interim government of national unity.
Exactly, Dr. Sawyer. So they invited Ulimbo in town because they wanted Ulimbo to fight to make sure that they can stabilize and neutralize the IMPF because Taylor said he was taking the town. So they fought, and so there were so many people that fought because of so many reasons. Now, coming to the TRC report, because of this war, we have election. Taylor won, and then Lord said no. Taylor too made a mistake when he won the elections. The first catastrophe that happened, the Doki were slaughtered. So all the other actors, the late Haji Krumah, Bole, then all those that have participated in the previous war, they said no, then we can't stay here. We got to leave. That many persons started leaving, and again, the mistake Taylor made, and which one of the corrections that Madam Ellen Johnson said he made and corrected. Taylor shouldn't have allowed ECOMO to leave the country. And Madam Sally was very careful with that when she took over. She said, no, I want the international community, the soldiers to remain here. Taylor didn't do that. Taylor insisted on him to win the interest of the people, the international community, to be attracted because you have just come from war. How do you transform yourself from a national liberation struggle to a civilian government? Like the late Dr. Amaka Cabral told the Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verdean revolutionary. He said, look, there is a difference between a guerrilla and a soldier. He said, after the independence, when we come to independence, the national liberation struggle, the move we came from, we should do away with it. Now we will be accountable when we are turned to a soldier for your actions and the purpose of struggle and change. It's not about only the essence of the change of government. It's about the people seeing their life improving, their children going to school and what have you. So these were the things that happened. So when Lord came, then Lord was used to neutralize Taylor. Taylor left. Now, this is where the problem is. There were so many negotiations and conditions that led to the fighters to go in Ghana. One of the evidence for that is the CPA. The CPA, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. One of the preconditions for Taylor to have left from here and all the fighters to disarm so that they will feel secure. They say, what will happen to us because we have fought a war and people won't prosecute us? What will happen? You mean the warlords, those who claim major? Exactly. I'm not. Now, people sometimes like to bring in Senator Prince Johnson. But Prince Johnson was not in the circle again. Now, when 1992 he was gone. Clarence, there are atrocities that were committed in this country. There are atrocities that were committed in this country far beyond from 1992 upward. That people have not read it in the report. Prince Johnson was no longer around. You're not right again. I'm not saying that indeed he's not accused and he did not commit anything. But I am telling you, because I stayed here for the 14 years, I didn't leave this country. We saw what happened here. From 1992, the atrocities that were committed in this country, in the absence of Prince Johnson. If I were a political advisor to Senator Johnson, I would tell him never to comment on issue of war crime. Because you were laying the basis of the CPA and the people who fought saying what will protect us. They say, no, even the political parties. So I don't know why the stakeholders don't discuss it. Maybe some people are afraid to talk because they say, oh, there will be repercussion, people will curse them and so. But we owe history. We owe the responsibility to history. In the CPA, they call for amnesty. General amnesty to all of those who fought the war. So that
in the CPA,
let me give you
the comprehensive peace agreement.
Exactly. I'll leave you in the document. Anything I talk about, I'll leave the document for you. Yeah. This is the CPA. In fact, I got this from the digital something of the United States Institute of Peace. The Comprehensive Peace Accord.
Yep.
In the CPA, you will look at Article 24. It talks about amnesty. I want you to read it.
Article 24.
Amnesty.
Up there. Let's come here. Article 24 talks about amnesty. The National Transitional Government of Liberia shall. It say may. It becomes binding. The National Transitional Government of Liberia shall give consideration to a recommendation for general amnesty to all persons and parties engaged or involved in military activities during the Liberian civil conflict that is the subject of this agreement.
You see that? That's the CPA. Then let me show you something again. So in this document, it laid out the foundation of the transitional government. What it should do, establish the International Independent Human Rights Commission. The Independent Human Rights Commission must move to the legislature for the establishment of the Truth Commission. In the CPA, there is nowhere here Article 8 that gave authority to the TRC in its recommendation to indict people for criminal prosecution or under international crime. Read that document.
Article, you say 8?
Yeah, Truth Commission, the first paragraph.
Truth and Reconciliation Commission. 1. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission shall be established to provide a forum that will address issues of impunity as well as an opportunity for both the victims and perpetrators of human rights violations to share their experiences in order to get a clear picture of the past to facilitate genuine healing and reconciliation.
You seen it? The reason for the CPA is that when the stakeholders met in Accra, they said we want a South African type of TRC. That was the argument. That was the reason they established this. Now, based on the CPA, I'll leave you with you. Based on the CPA, the Comprehensive Accord, the government of Liberia, through the national legislature, passed an act of legislation that granted clemency from 1989 to 2003. The Liberian government. Let me give you the act. Okay, I brought one from you. Because you know you're responsible to be educating the people.
An act to grant impunity from both civil and criminal proceedings against all persons within the jurisdiction of the Republic of Liberia from acts and or crimes committed during the Civil War, December 1989 to August 2003.
You see that?
Approved August 7, 2003. Published by Authority, Ministry of Foreign Affairs on August 8, 2003.
Thank you.
Whereas the fundamental rights and dignity of the people of the Republic of Liberia were curtailed and hijacked by the 1980 coup d'etat and of the 20th president of the Republic of Liberia. And whereas during these regimes, tribalism and sectionalism were at its highest peak, which culminated to tribal killings, mayhem, and destruction. And whereas, as a result of these acts committed against peaceful and law-abiding citizens of Liberia from diverse backgrounds, Liberians, being afraid of losing their lives, exiled themselves, while others reluctantly stayed in Liberia to be named by those repressive regimes. And whereas a group of exiled patriotic Liberians on a moral and divine obligations to liberate Liberia and the Liberians from the yoke of terror, tribalism, and untimely death united under the banner of the MPF, your National Patriotic Front of Liberia, and launched a popular civil uprising welcomed by more than 80% of Liberians in Liberia, as exhibited by the granting of legitimate constitutional and democratic state power to the political wing MPP. And whereas before the special election of July 1997, all former warring faction, MPFL, AFL, UDMOK, UDMOJ, LPC, Local Defense Force were engaged in a 7-year-old civil war. And whereas the special election of July 1997 with subsequent inauguration on August 2, 1997 marked the end of 7-year-old civil war, which brought into being a government of inclusion with all former warring factions and political parties on board. And whereas some former contestants of the July 1979 special elections and members of the warring faction left the government and exiled themselves in neighboring countries. And whereas these individuals grouped into two separate warring factions, namely Liberians United for Reconciliation and Democracy, LOY, and the Movement for Democracy in Liberia, MODEL, and launched a fanatical, ethical, and religious war against the MPP-led government and a peace-loving and war-weary Liberian from August 1999 and up to present. And whereas these events have led to another civil war, which has uprooted all Liberians, killed some, thus bringing back tribal and religious hatred, and now therefore it is enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the Republic of Liberia in Legislature Assembly or Assembled, Section 1, that from and immediately after the passage of this act, impunity is hereby rented from both civil and criminal proceedings against all persons, officials of government, representatives of warring factions, and combatants within the jurisdiction of the Republic of Liberia for all acts and all crimes committed by them during the 13 years and 8 months of the civil wars covering from December 1989 to August 2003. Section 2, this act shall take effect immediately upon the publication in handbill. And law to the contrary,
notwithstanding.
So, Councillor Arthur Johnson, because of the importance of the show, we extended to 10:30.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Then it means that everything that happened at that time, there is an immunity. Then again, I bring your attention also to chapter 3, chapter 13, article 97. That is the last article of the Constitution of Liberia. This provision of the Constitution grants clemency for people for the PRC from 1980.
You say what's the article here?
Article 97.
Article 97.
Chapter 13.
Yeah. Chapter, is it right here?
That's it. This is 97 to the end.
Right here?
Yeah, then you go further.
Okay.
Tell the page over. You see A.
A.
Good.
No executive, legislative, judicial, or administrative action taken by the People's Redemption Council or by any presence, whether military or civilian, in the name of that council pursuant to any of its decrees shall be questioned in any proceeding whatsoever. And accordingly, it shall not be lawful for any court or other tribunal to make any order or grant any remedy or relief in respect of any such act. B. No court or other tribunal shall entertain any action whatsoever instituted against the government of Liberia, whether before or after the coming into force of this constitution, or against any person or persons who assisted in any manner whatsoever in bringing about the change of government on the 12th day of April 1980 in respect of any act or commission relating to or consequent upon 1. The overthrow of the government in power in Liberia. before the establishment of the government of the People's Redemption Council. The suspension of the Constitution of Liberia on July 26, 1847. The establishment, functioning, and other organs established by People's Redemption Council. The imposition of any penalties, including the death penalty or the confiscation of any property by or under the authority of the People's Redemption Council under a decree made by that council in pursuant of both, not limited to the measures undertaken by the council to punish persons guilty of crimes and malpractices to the detriment of the Liberian nation, the people, the economy, or the public interest in the establishment of this constitution.
Correct. Now, that's for you, the constitution. That is the provision of the constitution that grants clemency to people. So
who participated in the People's Redemption Council,
PRC, from 1980 up to 1985, with the coming into force of the constitution, 1986. So you will see that whether there were atrocities, the killing of the 13 men, the killing of additional persons, the constitution granted them clemency. Now, we come to the Truth Commission. The Truth Commission made its report, and one of the problems was when the TRC was passed by the international, the Commission on Human Rights, when it was taken, when they pushed for the establishment of the TRC legislature, there is a particular provision of the TRC Act that the Supreme Court of Liberia said was unconstitutional. And this is the provision, Article 48 of the Constitution of the TRC Act. Just read Article 48.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission
Act, yes.
Article 42, 47, Article 48.
Correct.
The head of state shall report to the National Legislature within 3 months of receipt of the report of the TRC, and on a quarterly basis thereafter, as to the implementation of the Commission's recommendations. All recommendations shall be implemented. Where the implementation of any recommendation has not been complied with, the legislature shall require the head of state to show cause for such non-compliance.
Based on this provision of the Act of the Truth Commission proceeded and believed that every recommendation it makes, the president of Liberia, the national government, was under legal obligation to enforce those implementations, to enforce those recommendations. So it was on the basis of this that indeed the TRC indicted some people. Now, the people who were accused, majority of the people who were accused of atrocities or war crimes, were never given their day in court. They were never called to confront their accusers. Now, the standard of review and the standard of evidence that was used by the Truth Commission was called, in law, we call it the preponderance of the evidence standard. The preponderance of the evidence standard is a standard that is just used basically in civil proceedings, in terms of just looking at evidence based on the weight and looking at listening to the evidence, and you look at the weight of the evidence and you make a decision. It's not on the basis of the reasonable doubt standard. And so, based on this standard, the TRC proceeded to indict certain people in the form of while recommending their punishment. Now, on the basis of one of those who was affected, who felt affected by this particular decision, was Archie Williams. So Archie Williams proceeded to the Supreme Court. First, he went to the 6th Judicial Circuit Civil Law Court of Liberia, the Civil Law Court, Musrata County, and filed a petition for declaratory judgment. But in that petition, he raised issues. He said Article 48 of the TRC Act that gives the TRC the authority to make recommendations, and that the president shall be under the obligation to implement those particular functions. That particular act and portion of it was unconstitutional. He also questioned the recommendation 14.2, section 14.2 of the Act of the TRC Act, TRC report. In the TRC report, they said all of those that were accused of atrocity should be denied participation in government for almost 30 years. In its argument that the action of the TRC was a violation of due process. And when you hear due process, although it sounds like a big thing to non-lawyers, due process means before you say I am guilty, you must give me the opportunity to be
The process
heard.
that hears before it condemns.
That's correct. So in the layman sense, say before you say I am guilty or are wrong, like we can say in the lingua franca, you must show first of all that you listen to my side of the story. That's one. Two, you must give me the opportunity to question the man who is accusing me. You must give me the opportunity to bring witnesses to testify on my behalf. And that you must play a neutral role in the process. And that was the problem. That was the problem.
Now, Councillor Johnson, thank you so much. Let me begin asking you now, because I've been sitting here almost 45 minutes listening to you propounding, historicizing the war and the reasons for what some of the things happened. And you have come down to a law in 2003 that protects some of the people who participated in the war. Right. You know, when I extended the invitation, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm very sensitive to a lot of things. And so I went on to do a lot of research because I knew I would have engaged an actor Johnson. I'm not a lawyer, but the war crime and crime against humanity, torture, genocide, somebody would argue that all of these crimes are recognized under international criminal law and the Geneva Convention as there's something in your legal thing you call just cogent normal, meaning that prosecution of individuals that may have committed these crimes are a bit on the statute of limitation. They are arguing that since Liberia is a part of the international treaty, like the Geneva Convention and its additional protocol, and domestic law like the TRC cannot supersede international law, Councillor Johnson. How do you come in?
Good. You bring it all straight to another topic we call international criminal jurisdiction.
Let's hear you.
Good. Under international law, there is a concept. What I'm trying to say here, I am not just saying that if the Liberian government decides not to prosecute, it means that the international community cannot prosecute. No, it's not what I'm saying. I am just saying on Liberia's own initiative to establish an economic and war crimes court based on our laws and what have happened is going to be difficult. That's why I say it's going to be difficult for President Wakai to establish the economic and war crimes code based on these factors or on these features that I have just identified. But coming to the question you asked, the Vienna Convention, the Geneva Convention, Liberia is a signatory. On the basis of that, there is something we call the doctrine of the principle of complementarity. It says that if a particular state was a country where the crime was committed, the international community or the International Criminal Court gives preference to the state to exert jurisdiction. But if the state fails to exert jurisdiction, then obviously the international community and the international court can come in the tribunal.
So in this case, if the war crime code is not established, is it not going to be calculated that the state has failed?
If the state fails, it does not in any way prohibit the international community from prosecuting, not under the RCC, but under the Geneva Convention.
Okay.
Because it came into existence in the 40s, coming to the 30s, 40s, let's say. And Liberia is a signatory to that instrument.
Councillor Arthur Johnson will hold you there just a minute. The discussion is getting interesting. Former Solicitor General Siema Serenial Seaforth is on my line. Councillor Seaforth, good morning.
I want to congratulate the European lawyer, criminal lawyer of high stature, with his excellent exposition. The question you asked bordered on Article 2 of the 1986 Constitution, which clearly gave primacy jurisdiction to Liberian courts and Liberian law. For example, under Article 57, the Liberian president is the foreign policy architect of Liberian foreign policies. If he goes out in the international community, his duty is to simply sign treaties and then return to the Republic. Under Article 34F of the 1986 Constitution, the legislature, the word used in a constitutional context is approved, not ratification. When that statute or that treaty is ratified, obviously it becomes part of the domestic laws of the republic. So when you talk about jus cogens, the principle of law is that the primacy jurisdiction would be a complementary jurisdiction in a sense that Liberian law will supersede vis-a-vis the international law, because if that law is ratified, it becomes part of Liberian laws under Article 2 of the 1986 Constitution.
So do you agree with Councillor Tamak Johnson that the establishment of the War Crimes Court in Liberia will be difficult, considering these different laws that he talked about, passing an act in 2003 and the Constitution and the TRC report and recommendation and all these things?
Let me add, I think the code has already been created in principle. I made reference to Article 57, Article 34F, and then what requires to be done is 34E. Under the 1986 Constitution, Article 34E prohibits the legislature from creating any code that is higher than the Supreme Court of Liberia. So when the code is created, War and Economic Crimes Code is created, Article 34B, Article 34J, Article 34L will apply. What B says, it will serve as part of the security of the state. J is that they will determine the primacy of punishment, and L will be the basis of defining what are the very elements of prosecution. So I don't disagree with my friend when complimenting his argument, and I'm saying the code has already been created, but it's a domestic Liberian court. It has it be given a complementary jurisdiction. Now you can go and find out what constitutes a complementary jurisdiction.
Councillor Cephas, thank you so much. Former Solicitor General Seaman Seminole Cephas, he says, Clarence, I don't come to the argument differing with my man. Let me take is it Anthony a law or councillor? I am careful with these lawyers and their tactics.
I'm going to contribute to discussion.
Are you Anthony a law or councillor now?
I'm a councillor at law.
Okay, I have on the line councillor at law Alfonso Zion. Councillor Zion, let's hear you.
Well, thank you very much, Clarence. Largely agree with Councillor Johnson on some of the principles and some of the issues. But I think there is a key disagreement at this point. So we need to be very realistic to our leaders that there is a need for us to sort of institute actions that will address the national programs we've got. So the first thing I wanted to disagree with Councillor Johnson is that the principle of the supremacy of international law is central to international law. And what it requires is that states exercise their powers in accordance with international law, not domestic law. The question of war crimes have been defined by international law, international jurisdiction. And as a matter of fact, some of these courts that the areas that are taking place around the world are consistent with the principle of universality. In other words, if a crime is committed in Liberia, even though that is wrong, but somebody can be arrested and prosecuted on that point. But this is the most important point I wanted to make. Look, there is a man called David Crane.
David Crane, yes.
The former chief prosecutor of the Cllr right now. In his submission on the 8th of February 2006 before the Subcommittee on Africa on Global Human Rights and International Operations, it has 4 conditions as a roadmap for Liberia. That is important. 1 is that the U.S. must make all efforts to turn Chancellor over to the court in Sierra Leone. 2, tie all international support to good governance and rule of law. 3, support the establishment of the TRC. And the 4th one, after some time, establish a hybrid court for Liberia to account for the atrocities committed during the war. We are at the last point of Crane's submission.
You mean we are at the last point in this case? You mean establishment of the hybrid court?
What we need to start discussing is a national debate that reconciles the differences as to the opinions, because there are empirical studies, Clarence, and if you can give us a chance, there are empirical studies conducted by the University of California, Berkeley School of Human Rights Center in 2007, that say that 74% of the people of Liberia said that the way they want to build peace in this country is to unite the tribes, educate the young people, reduce poverty, and provide social services, and address land ownership question. 64% of the people said it is greed and corruption that is responsible for the conflict in Liberia. The key question we have to address is that whether we want to tackle the issue of the root cause of the conflict, which is greed and corruption, or want to address the symptom, which I think is the basis of that comes out of the conflict.
Okay, Councillor Zion.
In September 2019, there is an economic forum where 350 people said that they wanted a war crimes code, and there was a resolution from the legislature where 26 lawmakers approved.
Thank you, Councillor Zion. Thank you, and you can trust me. I was trying to
ensure that there is a reconciliation of the views.
Thank you, Zion. Let's go to there. Let's go you there. We'll go you.
They want a different methodology in terms of building peace for this country.
Thank you, Zion. We'll hold you there.
Policymakers are also telling us that they want a war and economic crimes.
Okay. Councillor Alfonso Zion, you listen to Serena Cephas. We'll come back to Arthur Johnson. We're not opening the lines yet. One of those who is pushing for the establishment of the War Economics Crime Code in this country is Adama Dempster. He's being all around the world trying to make this effort come to a fruition. Adama Dempster is also on my line. Adama, good morning. You're listening to Councillor Johnson and the other lawyers. How do you differ with them?
Good morning, Clarence, and of course, I want to pay respect to Councillor Johnson and everyone that's weighing in on this issue. Unfortunately, I disagree with Councillor Johnson, and I also just want to remind him as to whether he be a member of the National Bar Association, Liberia National Bar Association, is aware that the National Bar Association have drafted the only statute that have been internationally edited, legally edited, and approved by even the U.S. War Crime Ambassador and professors from the Nottingham University Law Center and other regional legal minds, that the proposal drafted by the NLBA in Liberia is set as a document that could be used to prosecute war crime in Liberia.
You mean that proposal drafted is for the establishment of a war crimes code?
Yes.
Okay.
And the civil society rigorously, the human rights community rigorously work with the Bar Association on then Councillor Tiawan Gonglo's leadership that saw us do a formal presentation of that legal statute to the 54 national legislature of the Republic of Liberia. Though Buffer Chimbat was not in support, he kept that legal statute from being introduced on the floor for legislative action until we have come to the 55th legislature today. But of course, let me just let you know that Councillor Johnson, I know from the history as a big brother, followed the war. He also need to be aware that we are talking about accountability for over 250,000 people who were killed, slaughtered in cold blood. And today there have been no accountability for these people.
Yeah, but he also reading the different instruments that were passed by our legislators and a portion of the Constitution that talks about impunity for those who led the PRC stuff.
But I mean, he could read that, but he also give a room for more conversation and debate. When people are killed, when people die.
But I think that's why he's saying in fact, Monday, I'm trying to have a panelist of 4. Probably you will be there. I found some lawyers and other people. Let's begin this national debate about this thing. Dempster, thank you so much, Councillor Arthur Johnson. We'll come back to you. I understand we have an obligation here to do relay, but let's hear you. Then we can take few calls and wrap up. Yeah.
Thank you. I hear my brother Zion. I agree with him. I like his input. But let me just say something in international law. The doctrine of national security, which is a classical model of international law, have been diluted by contemporary international systems. No more again, national security, even though it's a debate in the international cycle, in international law, that national security will supersede the interests of the international community. The international community exerts its influence, and if you refuse, then obviously they use all the means and sanctions against you. That's what they do. But what I'm trying to say here is that these are the impediments that we have. And you remember before I started, I said President Walker will find it difficult in the establishment of the code based on these facts to Zion made a very serious point. We have to understand the problem. How do we deal with the problem? I list for you the 6 factors responsible for the Liberian conflict. In fact, the TRC dealt with one of the other one they call the issue of historical interpretation. The TRC recommend that we need to rewrite the history of Liberia because the history is the raw material.
And I think President Sali set up a committee to start.
Yeah, the history is the raw material for political science. You cannot promulgate public policy or promulgate political science in the absence of history. To be a good, very good teacher, you will understand the history. So history is the raw material. That's what political science students say, factorial and periodic social dynamisms are the factors and basis for political analysis. Then the public administrator must be somebody who understands the history and the political science of the country, or political history of the country, or the political dynamics of the country. You public administrator, you don't understand the history, you don't understand the body politics, then you can't promulgate very good public policy in the truth. So the TRC said we must rewrite the history as one of the, that's because one, the history was written in the interest of a particular class. The issue of punishment, I am not against the punishment of people who indeed kill people around here. That's not what I'm saying. It's not what I'm saying. But I want people to know that this conflict that we have, especially from 1988 to 2003, it was their issue.
Councillor,
how can we reconcile the people?
Let's take a few calls here and then we can wrap up. I'm telling you, we'll do a redux of this show. We'll bring Councillor Johnson sometime next week and other lawyers right here. 0777. Hello?
Clarence, good morning.
Just call your name. 30 seconds. Let's hear you. We got to go.
Thank you, Clarence. This is Mark Doko. And let me appreciate the councillor for the well-learned explanation. But I want to disagree with him respectfully. Because we as advocates for the establishment of World Economic Crimes Code, and seeing a lawyer, a well-teaching lawyer, who is not in the defense that they want.
No. That is, he is not defending. He is telling you what is legal. Some of the legal issues that have been, he's not defending. You just heard him say he's not against. So you mean he's not defending? Yeah.
So I listen to this.
Okay, let's take another call from the US. This one here. Hello. Good morning. Are you there?
Yeah. Hello. You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. This is Max Davis calling from the state of Maryland.
Go ahead. Mr. David, you want to go ahead? Well, I'm finding it difficult. Let me get former Superintendent Janji back there. Let's hear you, Janji.
Thank you, Clarence. Let me say good morning to Councillor Arthur Johnson, one of my best lawyers in the country. In your closing argument, not too long, you raised an issue that caught my attention. You said from 1980 to 2003, the war we fought, they were on the basis of paying their issue. And which I think is true. But if it is on the basis of paying debt issue, they will all be paying of debt. So to avoid paying of debt, we all have to sit on the table to find a ramification, to find a way for us to stop the paying of debt. And to stop the paying of debt, people must not go with impunity. People should be punished for crime they committed against humanity. So for me,
Thank you, Janji Bakbe. Let me go and take a foreign call. We'll wrap up very shortly, my people. Hello.
Good morning, Clarence. Frank Gibson, I call from Paris, and good morning to the council in the studio.
Frank Gibson, let's hear you.
You see, sometimes most people talk about the international community comparing cases against people. But sometimes some of the comparing of cases against people are based on fraud. They don't go into the detail to get the actual factor of what actually happened, whether it is true or not. They do it sometimes based on sentiment and people lying on other people because of money. You know, they met somebody called just Stevie Rapp. I had the opportunity to meet Stevie Rapp, and I had the opportunity to meet with 7 lawyers who were investigating
Taylor? Oh, Frank Gibson, we lost you. Let me take Liberian lawyer, former Justice and Peace Commission here, Councillor Augustine Toh. Councillor Toh, let's hear you.
morning, Clarence.
Good morning.
Yeah, I want to say good morning to my colleague Arthur Johnson in the studio there. Yeah, I mean, Clarence, I followed the discussion halfway in the interview with Arthur.
Okay, Councillor.
I think he made some salient points. which I myself have been torturing over the years. I'm one person who has been an advocate of the war crime code to bring it to fruition in this country. But I equally believe to establishment of the war crime code is not as easy as people are taking it to be. If you look at the complexity of the laws that we had and the act by the national legislature, the constitutional provision that gave backing to people who participated in the 1980 coup, all those kind of things make it a little bit difficult. It's not as easy that people take it to be. If assuming that it's not something that President Buhari can get up tomorrow and say, no, Liberia will establish a war crime code, and it is established. You first of all have to look at the framework of the code, the law that you are going to use, whether it's building will be building domestic law or it's a combination of domestic and international laws, the structure of the code, the kind of judges that you will have, the perimeter under which that they will operate. It's a huge thing that is not as easy that people are taking it to be. And there is a discourse that think we should get involved in as Liberians and not to give you sentiments and give somebody ultimatum to say, who establish war crime code tomorrow, and you think the people
Councilor To, I'm planning to set up a panel next week. I'll reach out to you if you're available. You come on the radio. It's time for people like you and the professional. Let's talk about it.
You are welcome, Clarence. I will be happy to be a fan of that panel.
Okay, thank you.
This is a discourse that I think we all got to get involved in. I do not appear to be that it is as easy that people are taking it to be that tomorrow morning you can just say we establish war crime code and it's established and moving on the dot.
Thank you, Councilor Augustine too. Let me take my final call. Representative Yeke Yakbawolo Koluba, let's hear you.
Look, let me say morning to the audience first. I listened to the councilor, the well-learned councilor this morning. Look, I want to disagree with him.
Okay.
The president had the authority to send people before also we can amend the constitution so the war and economic crime code can come. Clarence, people don't understand what we pass through. What we pass through is very great for us and our family. Everywhere you pass, the people say, you can fight war. You can fight war. Only that court can be able to exonerate me. Can I be exonerated? Yes. Can I be found guilty? Yes, but only the court can do that. So we'll be expecting a senator. Look, the president got councilors that can bring amendments so we can amend the provision of that constitution that give right to us that have raised and brutalized our people in the country so we can be brought forward. So people that looted the resources of the country can be brought forward so we can be all prosecuted and be found guilty or be exonerated. So
Representative Yeke Koluba, thank you so much. Very interesting discussion. The next time we'll take the whole show. Next week, Monday, I'm setting up a panel discussion. I'll bring Councilor Augustine To, Councilor Arthur Johnson will be here, and then I will bring two other lawyers who have different opinion other than them. But right now we have a relay obligation. Councilor Johnson, you listen to the lawyer. It's getting heated. I wish we had the whole day to do this.
But I told you, I said this topic is legal,
it's
historical, it's political, and it has international law flavor. And so this is something that we have to, the political aspect of it. In fact, I've not even discussed the political aspect, but that's for another day. Because the political aspect of this is, there are people that you say, if you talk about establishing the code, there are reasons that we'll talk one day. There were reasons why Madam Sally could not establish the code. There are reasons why President Weah could not establish the code. Yeah, my brother and friend, one of our former students, Superintendent Janji,
yeah, back when,
talking over. But yesterday they were saying they could not establish the code because politically they were in the seat. Now you never is saying they were saying, because when you're in the driving seat, then you know that all what you were saying were abstract theories. Okay? But let me tell you something. If we depend, I listen to the Honorable has a point of that. But let me just tell you, Honorable Koluba, my nephew, traditionally, if you rely on the TRC report, is an instrument there on arrival regarding the evidence that the TRC has to prosecute. Why? This is the opinion I wanted to give you. This is the Supreme Court's opinion.
Okay, I got it.
Dealing with this, you can take your time and read it. The Supreme Court opinion nullifies everything in the process, in the issue of Section 14.2 that has to do with the recommendations regarding prosecution of the TRC that was made by the TRC against individuals accused of war crimes. And because, in fact, the Supreme Court said that the standard used by the TRC was a violation of Article 20 of the Constitution that talks about due process. And one of the first cases they even cited was Wallow versus Wallow. Wallow versus Wallow is the landmark case in our legal jurisprudence that talk about due process, that before you convict, you must hear. So that is what I'm talking about. Now, you were talking about the establishment of the code. Why, if the government does not move forward? That doctrine of complementarity, there are principles of jurisdiction.
Councillor Arthur Johnson, man, look, I never get tired talking to you. Trust me, I will be on you this weekend. I want you to be here on Monday. I mean, if I have to come to your house and plead with you, I will bring you on Monday, because this is the demand from the Liberian people. Your thousands of students. This country will need people like Arthur Johnson, Councillor Gossin too, and then I'll find 2 other lawyers. Councillor Johnson, thank you so much for coming.